What's up, everybody? I'm Taylor, and I'm powerless over life, but not my reaction to life. I created this YouTube channel with the intent to only share my personal experience, strength, and hope. This is my truth. This is what I've been through in my healing journey, things I've done to help myself, things that I've done that didn't work for me. And I want to share it with people because I feel like people deserve to know. Everything I share in my videos took me a lifetime to figure out. The knowledge, the resources, the tools, just the information and lived experience in general. It's everything combined, right? And this video is going to focus on Alcoholics Anonymous. Step 3, made a decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care of God as we understand it. Now, when the big book says God, it just means your understanding of God, your understanding of a higher power. It doesn't have to be that God you grew up with. It doesn't have to be anybody else's God. It needs to be your higher power. And that's something I struggled with coming in and out of the program for about 10 years. And I would hear that word God and I would get so angry. And I would blame a God I didn't believe in, and I would find some excuse and justification of why 12-step programs wouldn't work for me, and I would leave. And so it took a long time for me to open up my mind. And in the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous and how it works, it says, to be honest, open-minded, and willing. And it took me my entire life to become all three of those things. It didn't happen overnight. So for me, it was a process. It was a process of me trying to get sober, trying AA and leaving, like on and off throughout a decade period of time. So it's not like I just jumped in the program and got everything all at once. No, this was a decade of trying and coming in and out of Alcoholics Anonymous. And the reason they suggest to get sponsors is because a sponsor has had another sponsor take them through the big book. And just because a sponsor is a human being, not all human beings have the answers. These sponsors and people in general are just teaching and providing other people with what they've learned, and some people know more than other people, and that's just how it is. It's not the program in itself, it's just the person carrying the message, right? And so I would also find an excuse to blame AA for why their program didn't work, just because it wouldn't work out with a sponsor that I had a relationship with. So there we go again, finding an excuse and justification of why Alcoholics Anonymous couldn't work for me, right? And I realized this time around I had an open mind. And they suggest if a person doesn't have an open mind, to pray for an open mind. And for me, praying means intentions, speaking out loud to myself, because I believe that my higher power is within me. And just like the Serenity Prayer says, God, grant me the serenity. I've learned to say, I have the serenity, because the more healing I did, the more spiritually and emotionally I became connected to myself by maintaining my spiritual connection on a daily basis. The more I realize that I already have the courage within me, right? I don't need to ask for courage. I have the courage. I have my higher power within me, because there can be no life without whatever power it is, the power of life, and that's just how my program works, and that's how my recovery is working out for me. And these are things that I've learned through healing and through time. Step 3 is only asking us to make a decision. It's not saying we came to become connected. And so in the beginning of my recovery, I kept it simple, right? I kept doing the next right thing. I kept attending meetings. I threw myself into meetings the way I threw myself in addiction. I did service work. I took all the suggestions. Like for me in meetings, I would write notes and I would self-reflect on what people were saying and how I felt about what they were saying. And then when the meeting was over, I would read those notes out loud to myself. And so when I was willing to do whatever it takes, these little things that I did on a daily basis, I feel was part of my step 3, made a decision to turn my will and my life over to the care to a higher power as I understand it, right? And it's being honest, being open-minded, and being willing to take action. Step 3 is an action step. Am I putting in the work in my program? Am I taking my program serious? Am I taking the suggestions? Am I really here for me? Or am I here because I'm forced to be here? Am I here because my family wants me to get sober? Am I doing this for me, right? Questioning my motives, like why do I keep coming back to these meetings? What makes me stay at these meetings? And by having a sponsor and really working the steps, steps are in order for a reason. And so steps 1 through 3 is like, it's, have you really truly grasped and accepted and have surrendered to steps 1, 2. So by the time you get to 3, and if a person isn't sure if they're ready to move on to a step, or if a person doesn't understand the step, because I know that was my problem, especially with step 1. It says we admitted we were powerless over alcohol. And if you've never suffered with alcohol, I am powerless over my emotions. You can be powerless over anything. That's why I like to say I am powerless over life, but not my reaction to life. And it took me a very long time to understand like what powerlessness even meant. It took me a very long time because I would hear the word powerlessness and I would think of weak. I am weak. I am weak. And it was due to my upbringing of why I felt that. And I had to do a lot of self-reflection, and not just self-reflection, I had to do a lot of asking questions. Not did I just ask one person, I would ask more than a multiple. Multiple isn't even a number to emphasize on how many people I would ask the same question to, so I could get different perspectives. That's the thing. And growing up in the household I did, like when I would ask questions, because I've always been a deep thinker, I've always not been stuck inside the box. I have thought outside of the box and outside of that box and outside of that box, okay? I've always been a deep thinker, and I would ask such deep questions as a child, and I would be criticized, and I would be told, like, why would you ask that stupid question? How stupid is that? And it would shut me down, and I had to learn to be vulnerable in Alcoholics Anonymous. I had to learn to open up to people, to ask for help, to ask questions. And for me, I learned that when I started getting curious about how the program worked, and just curious about how my brain worked, and how healing worked in general, is when I knew I was willing. And back in the day, I used to ask people all the time when I would come in the program, and I would say, how do I know if I'm willing, right? They would grin at me and they would say, oh, you'll know, you'll feel it in your heart. And for a decade, I would come in and out the program and I was not feeling it in my heart. Like, I knew I needed to change. I knew that there were serious consequences to my using. I knew that it was causing chaos and pain to myself and to everyone in my life. But deep in my heart, I just couldn't find the willingness. And for me, I found the willingness sober, actually. I was so broken. My mental health had declined so drastically that I became so depressed. All I did was sleep all day, every day, sober. And the only thing that kept me going and kept me alive was knowing the pain I would cause to my family. And it was also because there was a tiny dot of me that whispered, keep fighting. And if that tiny voice is in a person that keeps whispering, keep fighting, keep trying, then keep taking action. Keep trying to do your best. You fall down, you get back up. You fall back down, you get back up, and you just keep trying. That's willingness in itself, is when a person keeps getting back up after they fall back down. I was a chronic relapser. And all this ties into step 3 because I'm making a decision to be the best version of myself. I'm making a decision to take action, to do whatever it takes to heal parts of me, to face my pain, to learn how to regulate my emotions, to learn new healthy coping mechanisms. I'm making a decision to be a better version of myself, and so step 3 can be translated into many different things. And what was blocking me from step 3 was, I grew up in an abusive religious home. And I didn't even know that religious abuse was a thing until I started coming across research. When a person's told, they're constantly told they're a bad person and they're going to hell, that's emotional abuse right there. That's not normal. And I grew up thinking that it was normal. And ACA really helped me a lot with just breaking old patterns and beliefs of my childhood. And honestly, a lot of self-reflection is why I am where I am. I say that a lot. It's everything that adds up to where I am. But coming outside and truly self-reflecting and getting in touch with my emotions when situations happen, coming outside in silence, no distractions, and writing down the situation and asking myself, well, why did this make you feel this way? Why this, why that? And just getting to underneath it all, right? Underneath the surface level. I might mask, I might portray as this on the surface, but what's really going on underneath, right? So step 3 is an action step. It's just asking us to make a decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care of a higher power. And there are also secular AA meetings. There's secular 12-step meetings that leave the God concept out. And what I've learned is that it's not that I don't believe in God. I just don't believe in the God that I was brought up in. And see, it can be very confusing to other people who have a very closed mind, because I had a closed mind. And see, when I hear the word God now, I think of higher power, I think of creator, I think of spirit of the universe, the power of life. I think of it just as a vocabulary word to describe a power greater than myself that no human, no science, and no history understands, right? So I believe that the vocabulary words of all these different vocabulary words of describing a power greater than ourselves, Allah, God, whatever, right? Whatever a person's religious background is, their spiritual beliefs, their culture, just everything. It prevents us from connecting to each other. It prevents us from having an open mind, because it prevented me. And so my brain has learned to look at the word God and look at power greater than myself. And I had to force myself to get like that. I had to work really hard to get like that. And I can still get dysregulated when I hear people talking about Bible thumping or pushing their religion on me and things like that. And it's because it's I know what I believe. And also coming from the type of background, religious background I did, it triggers that childhood stuff. So I'm able to just, when that happens, I ask people, can we please not speak about religion or politics or any outside issue? If you want to speak about spirituality, that's fine. If you want to speak about, meditation, self-reflection, and things like that, I'm all for it. I never was modeled by other people until I came into 12-step programs about, religion is one thing. I believe religion is a bunch of rituals, history, order, control, right? I believe that people are unable to see that the only thing that matters is truly connecting to this source, right? To this higher power. And a person can be religious, like the people I grew up around. They were religious, but they were hypocrites. They were in addiction. They talked about people behind their back. They would gossip. They were liars. They would criticize me. They were hateful. They were mean, okay? But yet they called themselves and claimed a religion, okay? So that was what I was used to. But then I come into 12-step programs, and I'm hearing people, and I'm meeting people that are religious, that are talking about spirituality. And I went my entire life not knowing what spirituality was. And it's the ability to connect to oneself through meditation, self-reflection, silence, healing, growth, working on oneself, inner work, self-development, right? And I didn't know that. I wasn't taught that. So it took me a long time to understand that. And, I have both my sponsors are religious and spiritual, and they never push their religion on me. We openly talk about a higher power and how we connect to this higher power, and things that happen in our lives that are, unexplainable, which is people call God shots, right? So I had to learn to tweak in my brain the vocabulary that was being told to me when I got to step 3, which was we made a decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care of God as we understood it. I always like to say it because I believe that this higher power thing is not a he or she, right? And a lot of people will, especially in the program, will say, what type of characteristics does your higher power have, and what characteristics does it not have? And I believe this higher power, whatever it is, it's not human, so it doesn't have any characteristics. It only knows love. It only knows when I get good feelings, and I feel good, I feel like that's all that power knows, right? Which the vocabulary would be love. But like I said, there's so many different types of religions and theories and concepts in history, and I believe that people can get too caught up in that and lose focus off the number one thing, which is learning to connect to oneself through self-reflection, meditation, and healing. And I'm not against religion. I'm not against religious people. But for me, I choose the spirituality route. And I choose to believe in what I believe in because it works for me. And I've learned to drop all the beliefs that were taught to me. I've learned through time, healing, and self-reflection, and learning to get to know myself and hearing what other people share in meetings. I've learned to come to understand that power is within me. So all step 3 is asking is to make a decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care of whatever the hell it is that's larger than ourselves. It's not asking us to come connected. My spiritual connection came much later in the program, about 1.5 years, maybe 2 years in the program, when I finally decided to pause and sit in silence, and when I learned to meditate, when I learned to talk to myself positive. I learned to do that early on in the program, but positive self-talk out loud has really helped me a lot, and it helps me every single day, every single second, because what I believe is that, like I said earlier, why do I have to ask for courage when I already have the courage? But see, the thing was, when I first came into the program, I believed I didn't have the courage. I didn't believe in myself. But when I learned to believe in myself, I was able to believe in whatever power it was. But I had to first believe in myself. I had to learn how to love myself. I had to learn to forgive myself. I had to learn to be nice to myself. I had to learn to empathize with myself and take it easy on myself until I could learn to spiritually connect to something larger than myself. I like to call it the power of life because, for example, it don't matter what kind of day I'm having now. I can go somewhere in silence, and I prefer silence any time of the day. I would live in silence and solitude if I could. I really would. And I feel so free today, sitting in silence and just sitting with my thoughts and sitting with myself and just looking up at the sky and knowing that there is more to life than my brain could ever understand. And it's not my responsibility to figure it out. You know, I was a really huge conspiracy theorist. I will label me as that, which is just a vocabulary word to explain that I would research all these things of trying to understand how we came about and understand the world as it is and understand this. And I would dive deep into history many years ago. And it was a coping mechanism. It was a distraction from distracting me from self, because I couldn't stand sitting with myself. I couldn't stand myself. And so my true healing came later on. My true connection came later on in the program, but I had to keep showing up for myself, and I had to just keep being honest, keep maintaining an open mind. And I had to be willing to go to any lengths in my recovery, the way I was willing to go to any lengths in active addiction. I was willing to sit and ruminate in my pain all day, every day. So why can I not take action to do something that's going to help me, something that's going to heal me? You know, the thing is that suffering is a lifelong process, and so is addiction. But guess what? So is healing. So there's only 2 routes to go. Option A, addiction, suffering, or healing, you know, and it's a choice. And I spent my whole life thinking I didn't have a choice. But when I realized that I have the power within myself to become who I want to be, there's something that shifted in my mind that day when I realized that I am responsible for myself. Nobody's going to come and save me. I came in this world alone, and I'm going to die alone. I can continue to run from myself. I can continue to talk to myself like shit, or I can learn to like myself. I can learn to get to know that side of me. But I had to be willing and openly honest about steps 1 and 2 before I could truly surrender to 3. And that's why the steps are in order. So if you're back returning to the program, or you're thinking about going, you know, in any 12-step program, this can apply to any 12-step program. You know, in all 12-step programs, the steps are the same. It's just it's different wording because it's different literature, and there's like 50 different 12-step programs. There's also other secular addiction programs and processes. There's so many different resources out here, and that's exactly why I created my YouTube channel, to provide people with the resources and information and knowledge and my experience to help others. So I hope this video has helped you the way it has helped me. May you find the peace I have found within myself, within you, because you are the only person stopping you.